Hello guys and girls, how's it going? Screezilla here and I hope you're all well. And today I wanted to show you a replay of a match that I just had. Combined forces of British and Americans against Germans and Italians. Well, I say German and Italians. What I mean by that is British and Americans versus captured British, American and Russian planes. Let's just look at the team list here. P-47, P-47, LA-5, Spitfire. Pretty sure this is a P-47 as well that's connecting. Oh no, it's a 110. Okay, fair enough. We've got a 110. So, let's just look at the game these P-47s have. And then look at the game that the Allies have. Now, the Allies have got 1, 2, 3 heavy bombers on their team. And a P-61 as well, I'm pretty sure. So, a relatively heavy night fighter. The Germans have got a lot of Bf-109s. Well, I say a lot, not that many. They've got a couple of Bf-109s. HE-219, which is premium. And 2 heavy bombers on their team. Now, in this game, of course, the heavy bombers start at a good altitude. We start at, about 12,000 feet. All of our fighters were starting on the airfield. All but the P-61 started on the airfield. Now, we're going to watch from up here and watch what happens in this game, because it's just amazing. So I'm flying the Halifax, one of my favourite planes actually. I love the Halifax. It's a fantastic little bomber. Really good payload for its BR as well. It's one of the best payloads you can get. With the Halifax you can easily take out 3 bases and a little bit of airfield health. It's one of the only planes of... one of the only bombers that you can actually really do that with. Other than the Lancaster and B-29, Tu-4 and things like that. The really high-end heavy bombers. Everything else has usually got a relatively small payload. So we're starting to get some pictures on the map. 2 P-108s, they've dived, and they're going for a quick base run. So they're trying their best to go low and fast to get to the bases, instead of keeping altitude. So we've got one base, that P-61's getting in on them. Now if we look at our team list here, we've got a couple of premiums, not too many, but we've only got American and British planes. There's the British Mustang, which has got the cannons on board. So one of the disadvantages of this plane is you lose the 50 cals and you get 20mm Hispanos on board, which I wouldn't recommend. I would say just keep to a standard Mustang, because there's no point getting Hispanos, because they're useless. But all the rest are pretty much your standard planes, everything you'd get in a normal tech tree. So, all of our team are low, because, well, none of them are really climbing that hard, but they still have to climb. They've come into the mid here, and they're starting to climb around this section. Let's just have a look at some of the players in there. So, this guy is stall climbing, not doing a great job of the climb. But climbing away nonetheless in the P-51. Now this is the Allison engine variant, so it's a bit crap. One of the problems with these Mustangs is they're the Allison engine variants. Actually, does it? The American one has that as well. But look here. Okay, let's just switch to the other camera. Look at the altitude that all of these guys have got already. Now, this is a bit on our team because they didn't really get much altitude, but at the same time, the P-47s get an air spawn. They start relatively high, so they can get into the stratosphere pretty easily. So, this guy's already got a kill. He's just annihilated the Spitfire without any trouble at all, because of the 50 cals. And they're starting to mow our team down. They've got the altitude advantage. They've already taken out Halifax. And let's just look at the kill feeds here. So we've got the Halifax shot down, we've got the Spitfire destroyed. Now, P-51's down. The Spitfire's taking that down. The P-47's set somebody on fire and taking out the Typhoon. The 50 cals on the P-47 are just ridiculous, and the 50 cal in general is just overpowered. It's broken. It's fundamentally broken in the game. It's problematic because it's just too powerful. Now, they change things for balance all the time. They nerf things. They nerfed heavy bombers. They nerfed bombers when they were ruling the roost. But they don't change to 50 cal. Look at this match already. We've lost all our team because these guys were starting high up in the air. Let's just look at the P-47. So 3 kills. No kills up here. But within a matter of seconds, that guy's got 3 kills. And they were all easy kills from those bloody 50 cals. And it just kills the game. It's unbalanced. The plane at this BR is unbalanced. The P-47 on the German team is unbalanced. The premium planes are unbalanced. They need to do something of akin to when they nerfed heavy bombers by locking only 4 per game. Maybe lock it so you can only have 4 premium planes per game. Because at the moment, it's really ridiculous. Sometimes you'll get games where it's just P-47s fighting P-47s. And it's just who can head on first. Generally, the 50 cals will just rip everybody apart within seconds as well. Now, there's just 2 Halifaxes left this game now. And Sky Satan was busy saying, oh, I'm just going to bomb the airfield, not taking into fact that the bases had to be killed. Because one of the other Halifaxes was going to bomb the bases, and he just changed his mind later on in the game, not letting me know. But luckily I can clear up the bases without too much trouble. I've managed to keep my nose clean in this game pretty much so far. So we've got that guy, Siggy's Noob, going to clean up that Halifax. Let's just see how well this Halifax does. So this guy's already dropped his bombs on the airfield by the looks of it, without waiting, because that's what you do. So this guy is dead now. There's no chance he's going to get past this. .50 cals come and blow off a wing. Yep. So that's the end of that guy. Now, heavy bombers were relatively strong as well. Now, a 50 caliber round is a relatively large round as well, so yes, they do cause a lot of damage when they hit. But to make a wing explode, you need high explosive filler, and generally the 50 calibers were incendiary and armor piercing. There was no high explosive filler in them, so to say. So they didn't really cause things to explode, they just caused things to fall off eventually after they'd been buzzsawed off. The way they work in game is they just make you explode. Now, we've got a P-47 coming in there, and there is also another P-47 coming into the side. And we are pilot sniped immediately. And that's the end of the game. So that was 10 minutes of gameplay, well, 9 minutes of gameplay. Our team was annihilated. Yes, our team didn't play well, but when you've got air spawns, and again, you can just see how powerful those 50 cals are compared to everything else. When you've got the air spawn advantage, you just can't do anything to counteract it. So let's just go back to the hangar and see what else would be at the 4.3 range in that game. So, my guns were completely ineffective against it as well. Just to sort of bring home everything, you know, the quad 7.7mm do nothing to a P-47. You do absolutely no damage at all. Because it's metal skinned armour, they just spark. Much like Hispanos managed to spark as well. So 4.3, we've got the Spitfire VC, Tropical, which has got the quad Hispanos. It's a good plane, but again, the disparity between Hispano and 50 cal is just, it's really not good. So we had the Mustang, 3.7 Mustang with the quad Hispanos on there. Again, didn't really manage much because, again, the disparity between a Hispano and a 50 cal is just ludicrous. So we had 3.7s in that game. A lot of 3.7s actually in that game. The 4.3 Typhoon is just, it just catches fire as soon as somebody sneezes at it. The American teams, so we had the P-51 with the 20 mils. We didn't have any P-47s, which really just made our lives a lot worse. We did have a couple of Corsairs, I think, or a Hellcat, which they tend to be okay. But as you saw that game, we just could not do anything to counteract that German offensive. And as I said, just the sheer amount of premiums in that game. They had the HE219er, which, just has 30mm all over it. The LA5, which is Russian. But the biggest problem is the P-47, which is just ludicrous. Every single game, it will get about 3 or 4 kills. Nobody plays German planes anymore. They just play this. And it is really problematic. It's gotten a little bit better since since it's not been on sale for a little bit of time. But still, everybody just purchased it, and it really does kill gameplay. When you factor into it that the British planes and the American planes, well, the British planes primarily, were designed to counteract the Bf-109. They were designed to fight the Focke-Wulf 190, but predominantly they were designed to counteract the Bf-109 because that was the main threat. They were designed to hunt down German planes. What happens with that is they were designed to take advantage of the weak spots in the German planes. However, they weren't designed to take out the weak spots in an Allied plane. So what you get is when you fight 3 or 4 captured Allied planes, they have the same advantages as you and the same disadvantages, so you can't really do anything to counteract them. Whereas when you're fighting a Bf-109, they know their disadvantages, but they also have advantages over you because, again, they're built to take out the advantages of the Allied planes. But they're not built to exploit the advantages of their own planes. It's kind of like playing chess against yourself is you know your move before you make it. And that's a big problem that happens when you're fighting your own vehicles, because they're designed around the fact that they were designed to fight a certain different plane. Now, the American planes had a lot of a lot of incendiary rounds to them. They tended to use quite a lot of incendiary ammunition because they were fighting Japanese planes, which didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks and all of that jazz. So, if you look at the American, the 50 cal for instance, you have a lot of the incendiary belts in them. Now, they were fighting in Europe as well. The P-47 was fighting a lot as a ground attacker. It was fighting as sometimes escort, but mainly the Mustang was doing the escort duties. They were designed to exploit the weakness, though, of the Japanese planes. Things like the A6M3, the J2M. They were designed to exploit those weaknesses. Much like the Japanese planes were designed to exploit the weaknesses of the American planes. That's why when you fight British planes with the Japanese, you tend to have a bit of problem. But when you're fighting Americans, it's not too bad. Of course, if you're fighting the Hellcat, it just annihilates you because that thing was designed to take out Japanese planes. But in European campaigns, not so much. The other reason that, things like the Corsair and the Hellcat are quite chunky, big planes, they're not exactly small, especially the Corsair. It's a huge monster of a plane. Because they were designed for naval operations, they weren't designed to be flown primarily off of ground attack sort of positions. So they needed large fuel tanks. They relied more on that sort of chunkiness to get them through. Whereas air-based planes don't need to worry about that, so they can have smaller fuel tanks. You know, interceptors can have smaller fuel tanks, things like that. It just makes it very problematic when you're fighting the same planes on either side, especially when they've got a huge amount of them. Now, the Germans did capture some planes, and they did use them against the Allies, but they didn't have them in vast numbers. When you're fighting a flock of the P-47, or as they're affectionately known, the Hitler bolts, there's nothing you can do because those 50 cals just annihilate everything they look at. And that's the other problem at the moment, is the imbalance between the 50 caliber and the 20mm Hispano, or the 20mm MG151s. It's really unbalanced. You know, a 20mm hitting a plane is devastating, and a 50 cal hitting a plane is pretty rough. But the 20mm has more velocity, it's a larger round, and it usually has an explosive filler inside, things like that. Let's just look at the 20mm on the Focke-Wulf, for instance. You've got the fragmentation incendiary shells, which fragment. They're incendiary, they explode, they have fragmentation inside, they have explosive fillers. Those explosive fillers were designed to rip the hell out of a plane. Unfortunately, what they do in War Thunder is, because of the armour modelling, and this is just a pure hypothesis on my part, but it seems to be the case, because the way the armour physics work in War Thunder, which are not great at the best of times, the outside skin of the plane has probably about 1mm of armour, or 2mm of armour, say, but you're always hitting it at a glancing blow. Now, what would happen in reality is, once that high explosive shell hits, it goes boom, and then rips a big hole in the plane. It doesn't ricochet off very easily. What seems to happen in the game is it hits and then sparks, and that spark is it ricocheting or not penetrating, and that happens a hell of a lot of the time, unfortunately. If we look at, say, a tank, you know, which is basically what the armour values are modelled off of, when you're firing sort of at this angle on a tank, it's pretty much a 100% chance of ricocheting. You know, it's just going to bounce off completely because it's hitting a big flat piece of armour, and it's relatively thick armour as well. You know, 15mm is thick. On a plain skin, it's about 1/4 millimetre to a millimetre thick. You know, it's not very thick at all. And what that means is it should really go through. It's a bit like paper. The other thing as well is, a lot of planes weren't metal skinned. A lot of planes had cloth skins as well. Let's just look at the Welly. Now, the Wellington has a cloth skin, and it has a wooden ribcage, basically. Now, of course, they don't model the ribcage inside, so you can't really see it, but you can sort of see bits of it if we look through the windows. Wait, no, was it? It was wood and metal, sorry. It was a duramium and wooden sort of structure generally on these planes. And you can see the hull and the way it works. You know, you can see inside the braces and the rib cage, basically. It's almost like a whale. And those spars, you know, those areas were designed to hold up a lot of strength. They were tensile strength. And you could lose a couple of them inside the plane and still fly pretty well. But the big thing with these planes is, because they're cloth, generally if a round hits them, it just goes straight through, and it doesn't have enough armour to react. Of course, when it does hit one of the spars, it will react and stuff like that. But again, that's not really modelled in the game, and that becomes very problematic when you're flying one, or, well, when you're flying one, not when you're fighting one, because it's bloody easy when you're fighting one. You just rip it apart. The same can be said for the Sterling as well. That thing is just made of paper. You know, when you shoot the Sterling with a 50 cal anywhere in this location, the tail will drop off. And again, it's not exactly how it would work. So there's a lot of problems in that respect, and all of these problems lead to a problematic game. A game people can't enjoy, a game people leave. And this is the problem War Thunder and Gaijin is facing at the moment, is the fact that they have made this game that's very good, and it's an amazing game, but they're not putting that little bit of extra effort into the damage models, into the way things act, the way things react. shells, velocity, and balance. If you made it 100% accurate and realistic, then it would be very unbalanced for certain vehicles. We all know how the French autoloaders are tweaked so they don't have the realistic loading speeds. It becomes very problematic to make it completely realistic. And this is where sort of games like World of Tanks and World of Warships have a better balancing system, because they actually balance it to work in that respect. Whereas with War Thunder, it's balanced a little bit, but not enough. And certain vehicles are just overpowered, and certain gun systems are just ridiculously overpowered. And what that does is it ruins the enjoyment of the game for many, many people. So, I hope you've I don't think you'll have enjoyed this video, but I hope you found it somewhat interesting and somewhat explaining as to why the game is suffering at the moment and why a lot of people are leaving. This is one of the main reasons why I'm not uploading many videos at the moment, because it's so broken, it's almost unplayable at some stages. It's just not fun. It's very hard to enjoy the game when you're fighting constantly the same vehicles, when you're constantly fighting the same nation, when you're constantly fighting vehicles that are 10 times better than the vehicle you're playing, or when you're fighting a vehicle that is just unbalanced and overpowered, as is the case for the P-47. What can you do to fix it? Well, first of all, start it on the airfield, take away its interceptor spawn. It means it has to climb, it means it takes longer to climb. That will fix a few problems, because that's one of the main issues that people have with it. Secondary, nerf the 50 cal a bit. It used to be a lot more balanced, if you remember back in the day. The 50 cal was a bit weaker. Once the 50 cal changed, the game changed completely. No longer were you able to hold a fight with 7.7mm MGs. You used to be able to actually kill people. Well, you can still kill people, but it's very rare with your 7.7 on a bomber. Nowadays, it's nigh impossible, because a 50 cal will just take your plane and turn it into a fine paste before you can even get a shot off. Maybe remove the pilot snipe mechanic a little bit, tone it down a bit, because at the moment, the health of the pilot is based off of taking a 50 caliber round. You know, like, yeah, in reality, if you take a 50 cal to the chest, you're going to die, but you need to modify it so a game can actually work. If we look at the crew on this plane, vitality is way up there. So, with my vitality, I don't survive one hit from a 50 cal. If I get hit with a 50 cal, I'm dead. And when your main gun in the game is a 50 cal, that becomes problematic. It becomes hard to actually play a game when you're just constantly getting pilot sniped. The armor doesn't really work, because this plane armor is not thick enough to stop a 50 caliber round, especially coming from the back or from sort of the side area. It doesn't really deflect anything. As I said, the plane skin doesn't really work correctly. You know, you're not going to get deflections on it, but sometimes it bugs out and deflects everything anyway, you know, if you're at the side point. It's just fundamentally broken, and it really needs a rebalance, because at the moment the game is pretty much unplayable unless you're playing certain vehicles. Alright guys, well, I hope you've learned something, and I hope you're keeping well, and I will try and get another video up soon. It's a little bit hard at the moment, because as I said, I'm not getting any good gameplay videos really. I can get a few at lower tiers with certain vehicles, but anything that's, you know, 4.0, unless I'm flying with the Americans or the Germans, you know, there's really no point. Unless one of the team has a huge P-47 advantage and you're on that team, you don't really get a good game. It's really just so unbalanced at the moment, it's not even funny. Yeah, so I will try and keep stuff up, but as I say, you're most likely going to see a few more World of Warships videos and things like that from me in the future. In the near future, at least, anyway. Alright guys, until next time, this is me, Screezer, out. Bye bye.